right? In this section, we're going to come and look at producer surplus. Okay, so we're going to come look at this idea of producer surplus. And again, this just means this is like a net profit gain for the firms. So the net benefit. Okay, so this is well, I guess you can just call it a profit gain for the firms. So this will be slightly simpler than the other. So the first idea is, well, the lowest our supply curve is actually represents something called marginal cost. So the lowest price firms are willing to sell is determined by the cost. Okay, so it's determined by the marginal cost. So for example, if a unit costs $1 to make, then the firm will only want to produce it and sell it if it can get at least $1, preferably more than $1, right? But if it's going to cost you $1 to make it, and the customer's only going to give you 50 cents, then you don't want to produce it, you don't want to sell it. Okay, and we're going to come back to this idea in a few weeks, where we'll go a little bit more deep into why this is the case. But I think you can kind of get the basic idea. You don't want to sell things that cost below their marginal cost. So you don't want to do that. It's going to cost you $1 to make something, and somebody's only willing to pay you 50 cents, but you make it anyways, and you sell it to them for 50 cents. And every time you sell one, you lose more money. Okay, so firms, we wouldn't expect to behave that way unless they're forced to. And so in this case, we see our marginal cost shows the minimum that they're willing to pay to charge. And of course, they would much rather charge more. Okay, so we can then draw our supply curve here. So let me draw our supply curve. Okay, this is our supply, and we're going to say it's equal to marginal cost. And then, so we can say, well, yeah, so what that means is this shows, well, let's say $10 for this good. $10 is the lowest they would be willing to go. And that's because no one can make the good for less than $10. So every unit's going to cost at least $10 to make. So they would never sell it. They would just not sell anything if it's going to be lower than that price. And then, so what we're saying is, well, like back to the idea we did before, maybe our fifth unit here, our fifth unit has a marginal cost of, what was this? To be consistent, $12.50. Marginal cost of $12.50. So the additional cost for making that particular unit for this firm is only $12.50. By the time we get to our 40th unit, to keep consistent as before, now it's costing them 30, right? So now our marginal cost is equal to 30. And marginal cost refers to just that one unit. How much does it cost? Okay. So anyways, hopefully we kind of get the idea. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this idea that the area below this, so this area below this is the sum of all the different costs of the marginal cost of production. And so what we want to do then, we want to bring this back, and we want to look at it, what we've learned here. Okay, so here's our supply curve, that's our marginal cost, and then we say, well, what happens if our price is, say, $30? Okay, so if our price is $30, well, then the firm is going to be willing to the firms will be willing to produce 40. So they would be willing to produce any amount up to that, and we're going to assume that, well, they'll produce less than to sort of break even. It doesn't really change anything. I kept the numbers small just to make it easy to calculate. In reality, the market might be producing 40,000, or in some cases 40 million, right? So anyways, but we just kind of kept it simple to be easy to understand. So now we have two parts here. So this big one, so we know underneath this curve is our costs. So this is have to do with our costs. That's our cost of production, all right? And then we have another part, and let me make it maybe green, make it a little smaller. This other part here, this whole box, something. So what is this thing? Okay, so this box, revenue. So and that is equal to price times quantity. Okay, so that price times quantity is your revenue. So you get $30 for each unit, and you produce 40 units, right? So your revenue is going to be this 30 times this 40. Okay, so that's going to give you $1,200 in revenue. Okay, so this whole thing is revenue. Now, we could find the revenue and then take away the cost, and graphically that's what we're going to do, but actually that's a hard way to calculate it, so we're not going to do this. But what we can say is, well, there's this part of your revenue is just covering your cost. So let's shade our whole revenue. Okay. So this part in the bottom, this part is revenue and cost. So they just cancel out, right? But this part up top is the leftover, and this is called your producer surplus. Okay. So this part here, the part I'm shading in red, is our producer surplus. So the producer surplus is going to be, the producer surplus is the revenue minus the sum of the marginal cost, which I'm just calling the costs here, right? So this is the gain to profit. Now you might have some costs that are not shown in this graph because they're not this type of cost, but still, you know your profit's getting bigger if you have producer surplus, right? It's bigger than it would be if you didn't sell these things. That's the way to think about it, okay? So then we can go ahead. So what's the way to calculate this? Well, the best way to calculate is to calculate it directly. So to calculate directly, we need to know this point right here, and now we can go ahead and do it. So we can do a direct calculation. Again, we're going to use the triangle formula. So we use our triangle formula, and that's going to be that our producer surplus is equal to, so PS is standing for producer surplus, 1/2 of our base, which is 40, times our height, which in this case is $30, take away $10. Okay. And so we're going to get half of 40 times $20, and that ends up being, okay. So in this case, the producer surplus is equal to $400. That's the idea. And again, this is, well, their revenue was $1,200, and then we didn't calculate it, but I'm assuming if we do calculate it correctly, then their cost would have been $800, and so they have this extra part left over. But we just went at it directly rather than doing this subtraction situation because it's easier. And finally, we can say, well, what happens to producer surplus? So what if the price change? And I'll do the same price change as I did before. So we're going up. So let's suppose we have this situation where we were selling for a price of 30. So here we are at the price of 30. Yeah. And now our price goes up. Let's suppose our price goes up to 40. Okay. So our price goes up to 40. So then if this happens, we're going to get more surplus, okay? And we get more surplus for two reasons, just like last time. The last time it was less surplus because we're talking about the consumer surplus. Here it's going to be more. So one thing, if our price was to go up, and again, this is assuming people are willing to buy. We're going to have to do later on to show we're talking about two different things. This is just assuming people were willing to buy. So one reason the more producer surplus, so more firms can sell, right? So that's good. The more firms that weren't even selling before, now they get a chance to sell. They're happy with that situation. And then the second thing is we would get we get more profit per unit because they're getting a higher price per unit. Okay, so that's the second part is more profit per unit. So we end up with, for the two reasons, we find that an increase in the price leads to an increase in the producer surplus. Okay, and that's this is the increase in the market equilibrium price. Okay, so anyways, hopefully that's clear. In the next graph, I will come back and put these two parts together.